Welcome to Beyond Rockets. Hope you're having a great day. My name is Clark Dunn and I'm your host. Get ready to enjoy some awesome conversations from Huntsville locals about cool work they are doing right here in the Rocket City. You can connect with us on social media at Beyond Rockets, and if you're interested in doing a podcast yourself, I'd love to hear from you. You can visit my website, beyondrockets.com today, or connect with me on LinkedIn at Clark Dunn. Sit back and enjoy this episode of Beyond Rockets. Welcome back to the Beyond Rockets podcast. Today I have the opportunity to sit down with legendary weatherman, meteorologist, and founder, Bob Barron. Thank you so much for joining me.
A legend in his own mind.
Well, I appreciate this. This has been a couple years in the making of us having conversations and kind of connecting, making a time to do this conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to make this happen. To kind of get us started, talk a little bit. I know that you moved around in your career before you ultimately landed here in Huntsville. But before we even get to that, talk about going and getting your undergraduate from the University of Tennessee, as you have the cup with you today, and kind of getting into that journalism radio realm that you started off and kickstarted your career.
Well, actually, I was in high school when I started in broadcasting. I was a junior in high school in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And there was a local radio station there, KRAC. I called it K-Rack. We called it K-Rack. Many people called it crack. But I kind of thought that I'd like to do radio. I'd liked a part-time job in radio. Thought it would be a great way to meet girls. And so it was actually, as it turned out. But I started pestering the folks at the studio there to do a part-time job. And my dad said, if you want it, you just keep going for it. And tell them you'll work for free, you'll sweep the floors, but you want to be a radio announcer. And so I did. I took the teletype paper from the radio station and I read into a mirror. And ultimately wore them down, and they gave me a couple of hours in the afternoon. In the evening, it was a daytime station, so as we got closer to summertime, I had more hours available to me. But I'd go from school to the station. This is in Alamogordo, and do my studying, and then I'd go on the air for a couple of hours, and we could take a bus out to Huntsville Air Force Base. It was actually where we lived. And I loved it. I spent 2 years in high school, the last 2 years, and then we got transferred. We moved to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, and my dad had a sit down with me, and he said that jobs were great, but vocations were what you needed. And I went off to school at Spring Hill College in Mobile. And that was in pre-med, actually. Now, that's a vocation. But the one thing I learned my freshman year at Spring Hill was that there were a lot of things in life I would be, but a doctor was not going to be one of them. And then in the summer, when school ended, I got a part-time job in Wetumpka, which turned into my first full-time radio job. This was way back in 1962, and Dad got transferred down to Florida, Cape Canaveral, and then ultimately got transferred back to Montgomery. But that was kind of where I broke with the family. 17 years old, first full-time job, and just loved it. Then I got the offer to go down to WABV in Mobile, and that was professional rock and roll. I did the all-night show and had the echo and the time tone and the filter that I could pull up at will, and made for some very interesting newscasts that you did with the different sounders. And basically had a wonderful time. My mom would set the alarm for 2:00 in the morning. This was before we had phones. Most people didn't even have phones. I didn't anyway. And she'd in Cape Canaveral would back the car out, and she could listen to me at night on the all-night show
Wow.
in Mobile and know that I was okay. Um, and then I bounced around the South for a couple of 3 years. Ended up in Knoxville
Yeah.
in 1964, and by that time, I didn't know what ultimately I wanted to do, but I did know that it had to have something to do with broadcast and in a relationship with people. That was just my forte.
Yeah.
And so I started back to school in Knoxville, and this time it was in radio, TV, journalism, and graduated in '67. Met a Knoxville girl, and we married. That was going on 59 years ago now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, there were a lot of folks that were saying I'd never make it that far. Um, and then moved to Shreveport, uh, started getting into the management side of radio, went
Mm.
back to Knoxville as program director. I was in Montgomery as program director. And then in 1975,
Came to Huntsville.
into Huntsville.
Wow. And so, I mean, obviously, like, you'd been in the South, you'd been around, you'd been in Montgomery, you'd been in other places. What did you know about Huntsville in 1975 prior to coming here?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I knew nothing about Huntsville, Alabama. It was not on any major thoroughfare.
Mm.
So people were not going through Huntsville at
Were
all.
you excited about the opportunity to come to Huntsville?
I kind of enjoyed Mr. Smith. He flew into Knoxville, and we had a lunch, and we talked about. This was a case of being group program director for the radio station here in Huntsville, Way Radio, and for WNUE in Fort Walton Beach, and I enjoyed the circumstance.
Mm.
When I got here, I discovered that Way Radio was kind of in a Quonset hut down where the Crystal is, down
Yeah.
that area, and yeah, I felt like I would be satisfying a year's contract, and then we'd be doing something else.
And you would never see Huntsville again, you'd
And
be somewhere else, you would Huntsville would be like that stepping stone, but not necessarily the place you would land.
that is correct. It was the group program directorship that was most important to me. However, and originally I was leaving the family in Knoxville and going home on the
Mm.
weekend. But by September, we decided that it was much better to come on down here. And that was 50 years ago. We've been here and loving it. We got to
Yeah.
see the growth. We were part of actually of a growth spurt in the mid 70s, and then
Mhm.
of course of the space shuttle program and all of that. Uh, Huntsville became a pretty exciting place
Yeah.
to
I mean,
live.
and it's not slowing down. I mean, it's
Oh,
been
that
it's been incredible even in the last, 5, 10 years. And then to even think about it from your perspective of saying, "Hey, I have 50 years of seeing this growth," is just incredible. In 1978, you kind of first ventured into the TV realm. Talk a little bit about becoming chief meteorologist at that time. I think you were just supposed to do, like, a small segment to fill in for somebody, and then it ended up, kinda sparking into now, your maybe what a lot of people would, recognize you for today as being a chief meteorologist here in Huntsville.
Yes, it's amazing how opportunities present themselves. Um, uh, I became a pilot. It was actually part of the deal coming down here was to get the training necessary to become a pilot, and part of that was FAA advanced weather training. So I'm doing radio. I'm group program director for the radio stations, but the meteorologist at Channel 31 got a new contract, which had them off on the weekend. And so they turned to me and asked me whether I would be willing to do the weekend weather because I had some experience, in meteorology. And so I jumped at it. I again, it was just a new
Yeah.
media, which I really thought would be interesting. And I was on the first night on the air doing the weather, and the next day I was at a local hotel making plans for the radio station's New Year's party. and I'm sitting there with the manager. A guy with loading the Coke machines walks by the door and backs up, and he said, "Were you on TV last night?" And I was hooked. I mean, think, just the thought of that being recognized uh, was that quick. And so anyway, I continued to do my group radio job, and on weekends, on Sunday nights, I did the weather for I guess it was about a year. Went off on vacation, our first vacation in 3 years, came back, and, the chief there had taken the job in Little Rock, Arkansas, and they said, "We need to have you fill in temporarily until we find somebody who's, got a certification for meteorology." And I said, "Okay." So by day, I wore my group program director's hat, and by night, I did weather
Wow.
at 6 and 10, 6 days a week. This went on for something like 9 months, and it was getting to be very challenging. During that period, they also decided that they were going to go to 7-day news. So I was working 7 days a week on television and still doing my radio programming job. And finally, after about 9 months, I said, "Well, I'll give you a choice. I'll either move up to TV and uh, go back to school and do the necessary things to become a professional meteorologist, or I'll go back and I'll do the group program director, but for radio, but
Hmm.
I can't do both." And they said, "Well, we picked number two," and that's what I did. I had some courses at UAH. I did some correspondence, and I had some on the job training that counted as well.
But at the time, you were doing this training, you were doing these courses, and you already had the job.
Right, right.
So it was just kind of like in tandem. So like you would be going to class and then maybe even that same day being on the news.
Well, actually, yes,
Wow.
absolutely. And as I say, I had the necessary prerequisite. Turned out that my year in pre-med helped because I could count the science,
Mm.
but ultimately became a professional member of the American Meteorological Society, and I got my seal of approval for
And
broadcast
what
on
year
there.
was this? That because I know recently, like last year, you were actually inducted into the Hall of Fame.
But yes, and actually in the interim, I was in 1980 was when I became
Okay.
a professional meteorologist accepted by the American Meteorological Society. It was in 2010 that I was elevated to a fellow of the AMS,
Mm.
and that was a big deal for me because I barely got in. I got in by the skin of my teeth, but over the years, build up, I guess, the credibility that I was elected to fellowship of the AMS. Then this past year,
Yeah.
I guess it was this past year, um, inducted into the Alabama Broadcast Hall of Fame.
Wow. And that's impressive. And I mean, it's crazy because I think, I was watching some stuff, researching for this conversation, and you kind of coined a phrase on TV, weather in motion.
Motion, yes.
And it's interesting because it's not you kinda coined that phrase, but it was also kind of the process that y'all use with the maps that it actually is kind of how
You've done a lot of
the
research.
name came up. Talk a little bit about how those maps worked when you actually, because like, I mean, most people maybe listening or watching are familiar with today's technology and doing it. But talk a little bit about what it was like with the maps and how they did it with, I think, Greece and, like, being able to actually, did change what the viewer's seeing, but in reality, it wasn't.
Um, Let me backtrack even a little further. One of the wonderful things about being in radio was a theater of the mind, and you worked almost every day to bring somebody to your radio station, to your radio show, as opposed to the others. It was competition, but it was a theater of the mind. You had to make things more interesting than the other guy did. And that was kind of a wonderful experience prior to going into televisions because Then when we go into television, let me back up. There was this theater of the mind concept, and we spent a lot of time in radio driving people to the station and knowing what people responded to, what they liked, what they didn't like, a lot of market research. And when I moved over into television, I brought that experience with me. So I had help. I went to what they called Magid Smile School, where they set me in a room and said, "Okay, here's a white chalkboard. Give me a weathercast." And by the time we got out of it, I spent a week there. By the time I got out of it, I had no reservations about stepping into a room, writing on a map, and consuming 3.5 minutes talking about weather. That part was amazing. But what we attempted to do when I was doing the weather was to make the weather the kind of interesting thing that most people find it to be. Weather affects everybody, and usually it's a positive effect. Sunshine, beaches, all of that kind of thing. But there are times when it gets serious, and there's that delineation. Fair days, we got to talk about the good and the fun and the positive aspects of weather, and then there's these periods where we really have to focus on severe weather, who's affected, etc. And so that was the overall philosophy doing the weathercast. There were a lot of interesting aspects about the weather that I needed to get in, and this was before computers. So you would go from a wall map to a wall map to a wall map, and there'd be a lot of walking involved. This is back in the days that you actually wrote on a wall map. So we worked out this tricky deal with 2 cameras and similar maps of the U.S. on that we were looking at it on the wall, and we would have acetates that we drew fronts and temperatures and all of that on, and have somebody over here and somebody over here, and do one camera fade to this one, and when you're on this one, we changed the graphic, and it went back to the other, and then back and forth and back and forth. And I called it Weather in Motion because it was unique at the time. There was nobody else was making all these different maps appear in sequence, and there was a little bit of Weather in Motion, and we went into this thing. And it was just a thing that caught on.
Yeah, and I mean, it seemed as though it stuck. Like, it was one of those things that, they got used to seeing you on TV. They got used to seeing you say that, and it kind of became this, probably, in the evenings when families would sit down and watch the TV, that would be what they looked forward to as a family.
And there was a lot of feedback. I mean, people enjoyed that, and when I was out in public, people would always bring that up. So,
Do people still bring it up today?
Oh, yeah.
Like on podcasts like this?
Those that remember me. Now, I haven't been on the air since 1996. That's what, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
you got to be old.
You had started making Huntsville kind of your home, but then in 1984 you decided to move to Tampa before coming back to Huntsville. Talk a little bit about that move to Tampa, and then kind of the circumstances, and maybe kind of what would then lead you to say, "Hey, let's come back to Huntsville."
Well, in the broadcast business, the bigger the market, the bigger the deal. That's kind of what you aimed for, was the bigger market. And so I was here, and we found this to be a wonderful place to raise a family, and ultimately for our kids to raise their families. But there was this lure, and I got an offer to become the chief at the Tampa NBC affiliate, WFLA, and it was an offer I couldn't refuse. So I had a 3-year contract. We went down, and I'll have to say it was some of the most exciting TV I've ever done. We had the
Mhm.
helicopter, and I would fly out to the beaches and do weather forecasts. Or I'd fly down to the hurricane center for hurricane season and do these live shots. And it was a wonderful experience. I had a great time. The teammates, the co-anchors were just sharp as all get out, and you had to be as sharp to kind of compete in there in the interchange of concepts and ideas and so forth. So I had a wonderful time, um, and I almost looked at it as a 3-year vacation because we were in Tampa Bay. But there was an effort to get me back into the market. Channel 48, which was Aflac at the time, uh, made me an offer to return that I couldn't refuse.
Mm.
And so we came back when my 3-year contract was
Ar
up.
and that was around, like, 87, 88.
87, right?
Okay, and then I think, I mean, the kind of a part of your career, part of the history of Huntsville that would ultimately kind of spawn the rest of our conversation today, happened in November 15th, 1989.
1989, right?
Talk a little bit, about, I think a lot of people were familiar with that day, but talk about it from your perspective as a meteorologist and trying to explain and inform the community on what's going on to the best of your knowledge and the best of the equipment at the time versus maybe, yeah, we'll kind of leave it as that because I think that day had a lot of impact and ultimately kind of grew into the rest of this conversation.
Uh, yes, that day we knew there was several days in advance that we could see that the things were focusing on the southeast. That there was going to be a severe weather outbreak. All the parameters were
Mhm.
coming together. Just we didn't know the specifics, and I thought we were pretty well prepared for any eventuality. But as it turned out, there was a line of thunderstorms that were approaching Huntsville. There was a single supercell that was out in advance of it, and as this cold front approached, the outflow from the line of storms fed into this supercell, and it spun up
Mm.
into the tornado that came across Huntsville and took 23 lives
Mm.
ultimately that day. Huge tornado right down Airport Road, and it came without warning. There was no warning, not from the National Weather Service, not from any of the other emergency services, not from the media. We didn't have the tools that we needed to see this storm develop, which developed pretty close to on top of us. It was
'Cause it was, like, right over by, like, I think I was watching actually some footage earlier of you talking about the news of that day, and I think you catch the storm coming in from the shoals, and then around the airport municipal golf course is kind of where the action really that ultimately had that impact that took those lives began, and then obviously the airport road and everything else that kind of the Hazeland area, um I mean, was the technology in general at the time, like, you across the board, across the country, kind of at that like, it would have been like, it's not like, "Oh, Huntsville just didn't have that," but it was just the technology in general just wasn't there.
the technology in general was not there. We were
Mhm.
dealing primarily with this was just preceding the development in the late 80s of Doppler radar. These were conventional radars that we were using. So we couldn't really see the movement of the raindrops inside of storms. We couldn't
Mhm.
see circulations, but we could see other things.
Mhm.
And it's just the degree of sophistication didn't exist. We were getting uh, basically modem information from the radar that was out at the airport. That was what we had.
Mm.
And in retrospect, I could see how this whole thing had developed, but it developed rapidly, and it actually the touchdown, the first report of the tornado on the ground occurred where the police canine
Mm.
unit was, which was uh, by Huntsville Tennis Center now.
Okay, yeah, over on Lehman Ferry, kind of in that area.
Right. And the first word that we had came from a police officer whose car was overturned at the Canine Corps.
Mm.
But that was so close
So close.
that really weren't able to get information out. And what was double troubling that day was that a number of the companies were aware that the weather was deteriorating, and they let people out early,
Mm.
and it was clogging the parkway, clogging Airport Road.
Mm.
There were people that saw the tornado coming and couldn't do
Wow.
anything because they were caught in traffic. All in all, it was a very sad day, and got the information out as best we could
Mm.
that evening. We lived over uh, by Airport Road, actually,
Wow.
on Tannehill,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until like 1 o'clock in the morning that I actually
Make your way back there.
made your way, and I
Wow.
could see how horrible the damage was. I couldn't even get home directly. Had to go down the parkway, way down the parkway, move over and
And, like, go through
come back.
neighborhoods kinda thing,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think I remember my mom telling me, like, she was working somewhere off Airport Road, and, like, they got to, like, the, the deep freezer or wherever it was in the middle of the store and just kind of hunkered down and, like, getting back home and not many people had like, it just the things, that happened that day, and it was interesting, I think, in the news article that I was watching of you doing this and kind of then it was a kind of a flashback, or it wasn't a flashback, it was a recent review that they were talking about kind of the damage and the impact that it took. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, and then they were reporting on Airport Road today, and it's just like everything. It's just this whole. It's like couldn't even have imagined that it would do is that this would have been rebuilt, and that all these things have like would spawn from this. But within roughly a year or so of this tragedy, you founded Barron. Talk a little bit. I mean, I think I was reading I even saw some videos. This started in your kitchen, in your house. You were programming in your daughter's room. Talk a little bit about, there's one thing to have an idea that says, "Hey, I wish there was this. I wish someone would do this." Or like, "I like doing this, and I think there's a way for do it, but I'm not gonna go the next step of actually making this a company." How quickly was it for you to go, "Okay, this needs to be a thing, and I'm gonna be the one to do it?"
Uh, I'm not sure that I had all of those thoughts in my mind, but I felt like I had failed in a fiduciary responsibility of getting information to the public. That we didn't accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, and so there was a conscious effort, and this followed talking to kids who were um, what do they call that? Latchkey kids that were at home by themselves when this occurred. There were a number of them that were quite traumatized by
Mm.
going into a closet and coming back out and not having a home, but having survived this event, and so uh, I knew that there had to be ways of doing better, and we needed to explore them.
Hmm.
And so that was the basic, concept of incorporating. I had been doing weather reports on local radio stations, so I had a thing kinda built up in my home. My daughter would get up at, 6 o'clock in the morning and they'd get everything together for me, and then I'd get up around 6:15, and my first radio report was at, like, 6:30 in the morning. So we were doing,
Yeah.
uh, uh, sole prop type of thing out of my house already. But, it was, just a couple of months after the, tornado that I went ahead and, created, incorporated a company, Barron Services, with the focus on doing better.
Yeah, and then I think, I mean, '93 was a big year for the business.
Correct.
'93 in Oklahoma, it was your first installation, and then you in April of '93, you did uh, Tulsa, did some work in Tulsa where they were able to even detect to the, truck stop where things were happening. How cool was that moment for you to just think, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, you had just formed this business to then actually being able to then actively be able to provide the support that needs to be there for the public to a community in Tulsa?
Yeah, sometimes history carries you,
Mm,
and you just are there as things happen. But I had been through the experience, and I knew what we need. I knew we needed to have better information, and we needed to be very specific in identifying a severe weather event.
mm,
If we said there's a tornado warning for Madison County, people ignored it because they'd look out the window, they wouldn't see anything, and that would be it. If I could say we're tracking a tornado and it's here and it's going to be here in 5 minutes, it's going to
yeah.
be here the next five
If
minutes.
you're pointing out intersections, pointing out, like, landmarks, and people are like, "Oh, that school's down the street," or, "That intersection's around the corner," or, like, "That's my neighborhood." It's like, that's a little bit more than going like, "Hey, in general, hey, it's gonna be in Madison County," especially nowadays. I mean, like, if you said Madison County now, I mean, how would I would everything would kind of just go on as operated. Like, no one would really change their thought process to think, "Oh, maybe I should take a look at the weather and see what's going on."
Or more specifically, maybe I should run for cover immediately rather than look out the window.
Mm,
And so our first focus, well, first of all, there was research, and what we discovered in looking back at various events, you have to identify a significant event. You have to disseminate the information with enough specificity that those in harm's way will respond properly, which is
mm,
to go to cover. And that detection, dissemination, and response has to occur within about a 10-minute period, or we start losing lives.
wow.
That was the basis.
Mm,
And so, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do live radar rather than modem
mm,
kind of information that's 2 minutes old. And the first thing we actually did was tap the government radar, the National Weather Service radar, so that we were doing a live display rather than this composited information that
mm.
was coming in delayed. Um, Friend of mine, Dr. Steve Goodman, was experimenting with a R&D lightning detection network
I read
in
about
North
this. Yeah.
Alabama at the time, and I applied for and received a NASA technology transfer grant where I could access that network, and we included it in the live radar display that we had. My part of the thing was to ascertain the reaction of the general public to
Mm.
lightning detection, strike by strike lightning.
And
Um,
there was, like, a GovCon company that also was using it for some sort of there was a partnership that you did as well around that same time, I believe.
with
Oh, it was, I was reading the article and it was really interesting because it was kind of at the time, like you said, the live radar was such a huge it was something that you couldn't and it was like you needed to be able to do that and that partnership and the proximity. I mean, like Huntsville with the Redstone Arsenal and all that, I mean,
yes.
10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have ever thought that all well, those pieces would have lined together.
Well, I don't think we could have come up with what we did if we were anywhere else. It just NASA and the technology and the scientific minds that were a part of this community all kind of came together for us. So I had a display that that showed live radar as opposed to uh, uh, digitized,
Yeah.
formatted, delayed uh, weather information. I had strike by strike lightning, and I had that actually before the tornado. And it was the only thing that I had that day that was accurate, that was timely. It didn't tell me there was a tornado, but it did tell me where the storm was, so I
Huh.
could follow the storm live by the lightning strikes. And then this was in '92. My partner, Tom Thompson, and I came up with this storm tracking concept. And basically, meteorologists would pinpoint a dangerous storm that he was concerned about, maybe something that was displaying what looked like maybe a hook echo. And you could click on it and identify where it was now and draw a little ribbon out on computer in the direction and the speed you thought it was going, 35 miles an hour to the northeast, let go, and it would make a box, a severe weather box about where that storm was going to be over the next 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Wow.
And it, from that box, inside that box, it would interrogate and a database of communities, and it would pull up the communities at risk and the estimated time of storm arrival. And that was the first storm tracker.
Wow.
And the combination of lightning, radar, and storm tracking was what our first product of Barron Services was. It's kind of interesting. As it turned out, I was able to put that into different markets before I was able to put it into Huntsville.
Hmm.
So you're absolutely correct. The first station was KFOR in Oklahoma City. The second was KJRH in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm.
And in April of '93, we actually I think we had about 4 stations that were actually doing this. But the Tulsa station was able to identify down to a truck stop where this tornado was going to go, and it was proof of performance. So, yes, that was a that was a major event in our circumstance, and over
Well,
time
yeah.
got better and better at it.
Yeah, when did that kinda spawn other stations and other communities across the country to say, "Oh, we see what's going on?" So I feel like within that industry, they're always looking at other stations and other communities to see what they're doing and how they can continue to upgrade their technology, provide better support. Did you start to see kind of that snowball effect from
Well, definitely, I saw the snowball effect. In truth, we were the only company that was offering that kind of
Wow.
capability. It was very big in those days for television stations to have silicon graphic computers. And you have to realize that this was a period of time when big data was meeting the introduction of computers.
Mm.
And I got to sit there in the middle of all of that. Um, but it was a beginning time, and the silicon graphics were very good at taking various weather data and giving us these very nifty looking three-dimensional views of the weather, and we could
Wow.
kind of fly around and fly through. Problem was that it took an hour, 2 hours to
Mm.
render. And so everybody else had that. And we had this new, again, my partner, Tom Thompson, had this new thing that he was kind of playing around with called MS-DOS. And we were able to put it on MS-DOS, which eventually became Windows. And we were able to show radar live, lightning live.
Mm.
We've been actually we started with live lightning, so we had to have something like that. And we were able to track storms live, and none of the other stations could
Wow.
do it. So we had about a 2-year period in there that everybody was trying to figure out how we did it, but nobody could come up with a solution. And then 2 years along, we started getting patents on the
Wow.
things that we were doing. And so we led the marketplace in storm tracking for 10 years, a good 10 years. Um, and and there was something else I was going to add, but I can't leave.
Because like in '96 is kind of when you stepped away from being on TV. So at that point you'd grown the business for 6 years roughly at the time. What was it like at that time because this is, I mean, this is kind of, this is your first, you own your own business. And in 96, 97, you become like, that is your only job. What was that? Was that was it an interesting shift for you? Was it kind of just like things were rolling, so you just kind of jumped in and didn't really skip a beat? Or did you kind of realize at the time that maybe like this is gonna be a little different than like having to report at a certain time and like you're kind of the boss now?
The kind of all of those things. The first year that we offered this product, the storm tracking product, we got 6 clients, barely survived the first year. Um, I got a loan from my dad, as a matter of fact, to kinda get into the second year and get some accounts receivable. The second year, we went from 6 to, about 20 stations, that
Mm,
purchased, and then the next year, it was 60, and, it just kind of exploded because we were the only guys doing it.
mm,
Um, and, although what was interesting was I was not allowed to put it on my own station, here in Huntsville.
hmm,
So when my contract came up, uh, uh, I was down to the last week before my contract, and they wanted me to sign my contract, but they wouldn't discuss me being able to continue this storm tracking capability. And I said, "I can't do it. This is where I've got to step away." And so about a week before my contract was up, I contacted, MD's son, who was, what would you say, a peer, and I said, "MD, I've got this new capability, storm tracking, that, I think is gonna save lives. I can't be on the air because 'cause I've got a non-compete, but I think that, you ought to look at this for Channel 31." And he said, "I'll see you in the morning." And he came over to the house, and I showed him the storm tracking, and he said, "I'll take it." And, I showed him this new thing that we were working on, which was a crawl across the bottom of the screen that would come up instantly when there was a warning issued. He said, "I'll take that too." And then he said, "I'll take you." And I said, I can't be on the air." He says, "Okay, we'll agree to 3 years, 3-year contract. First year, you don't have to be on the air at all. Just make some personal appearances, whatever it is you want to do the first year. Second year, second and third year, you'll be on the air." And I couldn't, could- couldn't say no to that for
yeah.
sure. So for that first year, I was off the air. I was able to go to various trade shows and all of and go to television stations. We were actually installing in
Wow.
television
So as
stations.
soon as you would sign on somebody, you would then fly out, travel out, be on site, set it up into their system,
Train.
train them on it. So it would be, you might be in Nebraska for a week getting them ready to go, and then you would go to your next one. And at the
Yeah.
time, the team, I'm assuming, was just the 2 of y'all?
Well, my son joined us. He had
Okay.
graduated from college, and he joined us, and we were uh, running around. I mean, going from 6 to 20 to 60. We stayed pretty busy. I did go on the air, ultimately after a year, but then after 2 years, when my 3 years was up, it was unfair to Channel 31 because I wasn't there enough.
Mm.
And it was kind of unfair to the clients because I, my thoughts were going in 2 different directions. So I didn't resign. I didn't retire. I wasn't fired. I just kind of disappeared. I don't know how you describe that, but
Yeah.
the focus became the company.
Yeah.
And by that time, we were in the radar business, which was something I had never anticipated. Started building radars, and uh, actually, the National Weather Service was in the process of taking out this conventional network of radars that they'd had since
It's like
'74.
100 and something radars or something like that,
Yeah.
I read.
Yep. And putting in the next rads,
Huh.
the Doppler radars, the big Doppler radars. Well, they uh, were willing to practically give the parts of these old radars away if you just took them away. They were decommissioning, and there'd be a tower, there'd be a radome, and a radar there, and we started bidding for those
Hmm.
radars. Sometimes didn't cost us anything. We just took them down, took them away, and we refurbished the conventional radar, digitized them, and added a Doppler capability, and then sold them into the broadcast
What
community.
was the storage of doing something like that? Did y'all, like, have storage facilities that you were basically, I mean, those things aren't small.
No, they're not, but they're not that big either when you look at it.
Okay.
And between facilities here, and we were working with another engineering firm in Colorado. We had plenty of
Yeah.
storage.
That's awesome.
And I think we actually ended up selling about 40 or 50 radar into the broadcast
And
community.
that was something you, like, never in a million years wanted to, like, as even as growing this business at the time, you were like, "Right, like, I'm never going to be in the radar business."
Well, never say never, I'm sure was part of our philosophy. We were willing to do just about anything if it could improve the capability of understanding weather.
Mm.
And so this was a start for us. Now, where we did make a conscious decision was when we started to run out of these refurbished radars, or we were starting to get requests of, well, we don't want to refurbish. Are you going to be doing a ground up,
Mhm.
newly certified type of radar? And that's what we elected to do, which was about 95, 96. KCCI in Des Moines was our first installation of what we called high definition Doppler. And
Wow.
that was our own creation radar, which got us fully into the radar business. And we got to a point, uh, of course, we became known for our capabilities with Doppler weather radar. So as the next rads uh, were installed across the country, we had kind of an inside shot. We
Mm.
understood the data stream. We understood a value-added data that could go to that, and kind of became the experts in Doppler. It's an entirely different story, which I could get into as to how we became the number one source for dual polarity, which was the
Wow.
where we are right now as far as state of the art, which is the sending of both a horizontal signal, which all radars do, horizontal, and a vertical
Hmm.
signal, and interpretation of the data received from those two. That actually started here in Huntsville. Channel 19 and UAH's Swirl came to us. They had been given the uh, National Weather Service 74C out at the airport, and they wanted to upgrade to dual polarity. And so we said, yeah, we kind of would be
Hmm.
interested in doing that too.
Around what year was this?
This would have, oh gosh, right around 2000. 3, I would say,
Okay.
3, 4, somewhere in there, early 2000s. And, we said, "Well, we definitely have an interest in that as well." And so, among the 3 of us, we, produced this dual polarity radar, vertical, horizontal. UH did some initial work, we did some initial work, and, discovered that there were things that you learned,
Hmm.
like, ultimately, probably one of the biggest things that people pay attention to these days is the debris ball associated with
Hmm.
different size objects within a given area of a storm. You can tell when it's raising up a debris ball from a tornado. Um, and we discovered that there were other television stations that were interested in something like that. So we became a manufacturer of dual pole radar in Houston and New York and a number of major markets. and the government decided that they wanted to upgrade the next rads to dual polarity, and we made a proposal to them, and they said, "You can't do what you say you're gonna do. You know, we don't think you can do that." And we said, "We can show you. We've got them in Houston and New York. Just come see them." And they did. They visited our radar sites of the television stations that were already employing dual polarity, and they said, "Well, I guess you can." And so we won the contract, which is huge for us, small company out of Huntsville, along with L2. It was like a $43 million upgrade of all the National Weather Service next rads to dual polarity. So all of those 170 radars that the government
And
has.
that was early 2000s too that you won that contract?
That's correct.
Wow, and so, I mean, in a span of 10 years, roughly, from starting the business to then, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot in a relatively short amount of time. What did that 2000s, up until kind of when you ultimately, I guess, left being the CEO of Barron to then kind of the institute kind of also kind of plays kind of it's your main role today as we sit, and have this conversation. Talk about that time frame of deciding that, hey, your time maybe with the business is over and the institute is kind of where you want to spend your time now.
Um, well, it does seem to be a fairly limited number of years, but I am reminded that the Beatles were popular from 1964 to 1969. That was a 5-year period, and look what they did in 5 years.
And people still enjoy them today. So I
Absolutely.
think they're great.
Um, agreed. I listened to the Beatle channel actually on XM. The things just progressed. We got that contract. It really put us in the driver's seat, as
Mm,
far as the company was concerned. We'd established our credibility in that, but there were other things that we were involved in that were equally exciting to me. Nobody, the world was crying for weather to the cockpit. Pilots were now getting GPS data, and we were able to be very specific in where we were in the atmosphere, in the air, but we had no weather
mm.
support. And it was something that I really, really wanted us to do. We had experimented early on with sending radar information to area emergency management offices via the sideband of FM radio.
Hmm.
Muzak is another example of using the sideband of an FM radio station, not the main, but there's sidebands associated with it. And if you had a receiver that was looking for information from the sideband, you could download that data.
Hmm.
And so it was a way before we had internet of getting information like radar information to various emergency management offices around the area. So I was most interested in trying to get weather to the cockpit. We were going to apply that same uh, thought process to public public radio, public TV.
Mm.
The sideband of public TV nationwide would give us a network of transmissions that would go to an aircraft flying and would provide them with live radar information. I was trying to get weather to the cockpit. I was a pilot, and when I got my instrument rating in 2000, and I'm up there, and there's nothing but white that you see out the cockpit window. Really wanted to feel more confident with
Mm.
some weather information in the cockpit. So we tried various means of getting to the cockpit, public television, public PBS, sideband maybe, not exactly sideband. It's called vertical blanking, but it was a part of the signal. we could squeeze radar data out. But all of a sudden, here's XM radio, and they had just become successful. They just launched, and here you had a little bitty puck antenna that could receive the signal from XM, just perfect for an aircraft because that's all you needed was a little
Mm.
puck antenna. Um, so ultimately, we were able to reach out to them and have a meeting down in Florida, Opelika, and they had been approached already by NASA, by Northrop Grumman, by a bunch of different companies, Harris, I know for sure, um, about weather to the cockpit. And I went down there trying to impress them with how accurate we were and how timely we were. And that didn't mean a thing. That what they were interested in is how much data can you get through this much bandwidth, because that's what they had was bandwidth, and they
Mm.
had to maximize the return on it. And they'd gotten to this question with everybody else, and everybody else said, "Oh, we can't do anything with that much. We got to have this much." Uh, I had had this experience of passing radar through the sideband of an FM radio station, and I said,
That's plenty.
give me 30 days and I'll show you." And 30 days later, we sat there at their headquarters and downlinked what was almost what we ended up uh, initiating service with. I mean, it was
Wow.
that much. I had radar, I had lightning, I had some cloud cover stuff that
Wow.
we'd worked out, and so we had the answer that nobody else had, which was squeezing it through
Yeah.
limited bandwidth, and that actually became a huge success. It was, first of all, likened to the advent of GPS in the cockpit, um, uh, the digital avionics that exist these days. Weather to the cockpit was a huge, huge
And
success.
that's all in, like, the early 2000s that you were doing. I mean, it was from one stepping from winning the government contracting to do all their stuff to then weather in the cockpit was, within a few years of each other.
Yep, and I'm not even sure what came first. We
Just
were
one
doing a
big
lot of
blur.
stuff. Yeah.
One big blur with just how much y'all were kind of just I mean, finding I think that, like, that's the key for most people, even obviously, pretty much in any industry, is just finding the gaps in the industry, gaps where you can be able to provide support, gaps where your technology and it seemed like you were, very, very, very successful at it, is finding areas and industries where the technology that you had already created could be a fit. Not necessarily trying to fit in for what they needed, but, "Hey, I have this thing that works fantastically well that I think can just be implemented into what you do." Not necessarily trying to build something specifically for them, but just being able to implement it, and you've been able to do that, I mean, very, very well in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, the we I was fortunate in that this was the coming of age of big data and computers, and we were doing more with computers and more with data as I went through this thing, and I was involved. I was on-air meteorologist, and so I was very familiar with the
Mhm.
broadcast community. I was a pilot, and I was very familiar with that. So really, I was kind of serving myself, if
Yeah,
nothing else, and I knew what I wanted, so it became real easy for me to do that.
yeah.
You were asking about the retirement and all. I don't know whether I think I'm generally like most every other CEO. You really enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
When I was doing it, and so I was 67, I guess, when uh, my wife and I kind of sat down and said, "Well, what do we want to do with the future?" Most people have retired by now, and we did say that what we wanted to do was to travel. We had been taking advantage of a lot of things that I needed to do to trade shows and
Yeah.
so forth, different areas of the country, but a focus ourselves on doing some things. And so I kind of backed off from the company, even though I was CEO. I kind of backed off for a while between ages 67 and 77, and uh, had the company kind of running around me.
Mm,
And I don't think that was fair to the company, to be honest. So back in like 2018, something like that, uh, I made a conscious effort to build out an executive team that could take over for me, and then also did some things with our board of directors
mm,
so that we were much more professional in the way we were approaching things, much less reliant on me
yeah,
and my input, more reliant on a whole new generation
yeah.
coming in. And I felt very comfortable. This was about 21, I think, in turning things over to Bob Dreisward, who'd been with me for 16, 17 years as CEO, and he put together the whole team that kind of took over on the management side, added some board members to our board, and now I just get to go to a board meeting and open and close it, and that's the primary
Yeah.
responsibility I've got. And they've taken the company way beyond what I would have done. I was kind of losing energy, and now at 82, it's good to have
That's awesome.
another generation running
Yeah, and
things.
so did the institute start, around that 2018 timeframe, the 501(c)(3)?
Yeah, it did. Uh, you have to kind of think through the past. We came in 1975, 50 years ago now, to Huntsville, and my idea was that we were gonna be here a year. Well, this state and this area has been incredibly good for us. You know, it was a wonderful place to raise a family and, ultimately for our kids to raise their kids.
Mm,
And, so I and everything else was so responsive. The business was
mm,
successful and so forth, and it was only because we were here. So I didn't wanna just leave, and I thought that this would be a way of paying back, start an institute. We've got a couple of focuses. We're not charging, like crazy, but, the first effort was uh, well, the 2 efforts. One was to place an exhibit at the, Space and Rocket
which has
Center,
been open for about a year now.
about a year, How We Know the Weather. It's a multi-million-dollar effort that had, a lot of help from a lot of people.
Mm.
Um, uh, my friend Steve Goodman, for instance, brought a lot of NASA NOAA to bear. There's probably more data going into that exhibit than in most weather centers. We've got uh, the polar orbiting satellite. We've got GOES satellite
Wow.
going in there. We've got round the world lightning and radar, and it's all in there to show people how we've gone from analog instrumentation to for
Mm.
understanding the weather into the digital age, and all of the tools that we have in these days to look at how weather is affecting underwater, on the water, on the
Wow.
surface of the earth, in the air, and in space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is, if anyone's listening, they should definitely go to the exhibit. I have not been to the exhibit yet, but I will definitely have to add it to the list of things to go check out. I mean, it's interesting because I think it is kind of like you said, like, you're trying to figure out a way to give back to the community and, inspire that next generation. And what better location than the Space and Rocket Center from the amount of local visitors, but also to the amount of just national and visitors from all around the world that come there and see. And what's incredible too is a lot of that technology you were a part of, and it was done right here in Huntsville. And I think that's the cool thing that most people maybe, even if you've seen it, maybe just didn't register it. It's like, oh, this is amazing technology, and it's incredible to see the stepping stones that we've accomplished. But a lot of that has been done by you and your team here in Huntsville.
Well, and not just us. not just Barron, but NASA, no, a
Yeah.
number of other companies that have provided literally the meteorological innovation has come right out of here. The spherics, the lightning detection that people just take for granted. They see, you know, it was started here in Huntsville.
Mhm.
Lockheed Martin has carried it on, and Steve, for instance, was the chief scientist for the GOES 16, where we finally got a lightning mapper on board a GOES satellite.
Hmm.
He had a whole career
Wow.
in spherics, and I didn't want that to get lost. And also, I had derived a lot of satisfaction over the years in going to schools and explaining how we know the weather.
Mhm.
All weather is the result of the interaction of the sun and the earth. At least all earth weather is. And over the years, we've developed tools, analog initially, digital now, that help us measure that relationship.
Hmm.
And I was able to spend time with
Yeah.
the kids. Can't do that now, but they can go to the Space and
Yeah.
Rocket Center and learn how we know the weather.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And talk a little bit about your other initiative, WeatherNet. That's a big part of your other initiative with the institute, and it's kind of parlayed into the app that y'all have.
Following the outbreak in 2011, the super outbreak of tornadoes, we donated an app, the Alabama Safety Net app, to the state of Alabama. And it was Governor Bentley at the time accepted that, and we provided the capability for each of the EMAs across the state to actually put data in that would reach people via this
Mm.
app. And it carried our unique alerting capability for not only the National Weather Service warnings, but for our advisories of approaching twisting storms, which
Mm.
is that's unique for the app. And I got into a discussion. This is shortly before retiring, about how networks, meso networks, what they instrument networks, had changed over the years. Oklahoma has a very famous statewide mesonet, but its units are very costly, and it's millions of dollars a year to run it. And things have changed significantly over the years. Instrumentation now has become much smaller, much
Mm.
more compact. It's all digital, and we have the internet. We've got cell capabilities that didn't exist even a few years ago. So my thought process was, instead of having one sensor in each county, which is what a lot of these meso networks are, I wanted 10, 15 in a county, and include cameras so that we could measure the surface
Mm.
conditions anywhere in a county, and we could see the atmosphere, the air of every county. So just looking at numbers, if you had 10 in each county, and there's 67 counties, that would be 670 units, sensors and cams. And what we're putting in report every 10 seconds. They update every 10 seconds, and it's free to anybody, the media, to government people, to emergency management, and to the general public via this Alabama Safety Net app. We're working cooperatively with FAA, with the National Weather Service, with LDOT. LDOT has been a really good partner, and we're doing some R&D work going forward here in Coleman on weather data. Alabama Power has put in something like 30 units in the southern
Wow.
part of the state. We are now up to about 90 sensor cams statewide, and all of them are. I mean, you can look at the cameras and get the sensor information. All of that updated every 10 seconds. We're at about 90. We're right around 100 units, So I've only got 570 to go.
That's awesome. I'm gonna check the camera one more time. Well, serious questions to wrap up. Okay. Um. Ooh, it's been such a good conversation. Okay. Um. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible just to see your shift from, starting coming here to Huntsville, meteorologist, to starting Barron, to growing Barron, to, finding that time, get the team in place to exit Barron as the CEO, to then the institute now and kind of the way you're educating the community and, just I mean, it's an impact, it's a legacy it's gonna be here forever. If your days probably look a little bit different today in the role you have than maybe what it looked like in the mid early 2000s when you were running this business and, every day was a little different and you were bouncing around. What does a typical day look like for you as you're kind of in the part of the institute, semi-retired? How do you find your time best spent today in March of 2026?
Well, actually, the institute and the sensor network is probably more work than when I was CEO. When I was CEOing the company, Barron Weather, we'd have a get together uh, of folks, management folks, and we'd kick ideas around, and I would be able to say, "That's a good idea. I'd like you to do this, and you to do that, and you to do this." Now with the institute, and we're self-funded right now, so very limited in number of people. It's like, "Oh, that's a great idea. You need to do this, and you need to do that." And so I
Yeah.
spend an awful lot of time at a desk, just kind of communicating with folks and trying to move various and sundry things forward. I'm still playing tennis. I used to play tennis a lot. Now play tennis a little and poorly, but I'm at least still out there on
Oh,
the court. We have a lake place that I love to be at least 50% of the time. But we also have our grandkids, and I'm pleased to report our great grandkids. Um, we just welcomed young Truett to our family, who was our newest great grandson, and there's a lot of things that they're involved in. We've got one grandson that's getting married. Um, the other another grandson that just had their second child, and so there's an awful lot of family activity
yeah.
that we need to participate in, and that keeps us in Huntsville. Keeps us rooted in Huntsville. I get out to the lake when I want to get away from it all.
And so, I mean, as you kinda wrap up the conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, it's been a pleasure. If there's a piece of advice or, something that you would wanna leave people with, from, maybe the work you've done, the legacy you've had, or if someone's listening and they have an idea to do something themselves, is there a lasting word that you'd like to give them?
Uh, I guess it would be that if you have something that uh, you feel pretty strongly about as far as what you can contribute overall, you need to really focus on pursuing it. I- Mentally, I have this vision that we're all put on this earth to solve this giant puzzle, and that each of us through our lives can add one piece to that puzzle, and that's our contribution to the overall. I'm not sure what happens when we finish the puzzle. Maybe we win. I don't know, but that we're all contributing, and there were a couple of things that occurred when I was quite young. That I say quite young, in my 20s, um, that I could have pursued and didn't, and that became a major thing. This storm tracking was something I knew could save lives, and I I I remember specifically telling our family, I'm not going to give this up. We're going to either crash and burn, or this is going to be successful, because I think it can be successful. And the only thing that carried us through was the determination and the commitment to actually doing it. There were times I was borrowing some money from my dad in order to get us through to the turn of the year, looking at the possibility of some layoffs or something, to keep us going. And it was only the commitment that this was good. This was good and proper work, and that we needed to pursue it, not give it up.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking I think we talked for a little over an hour and a half now, which is, it flies by.
Yeah, it's hard to shut me up
Well,
sometimes.
and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to have you on. I think, the impact, your legacy, it's something that we're going to be talking about, and something that people shouldn't take for granted. I mean, it's something that we have. I think if anyone's listening and they haven't been to the Space and Rocket Center and seen the exhibit, that should be on your top of your priority list. We'll be sure to have everything in the episode notes, links to everything, links to Space and Rocket Center, links to Barron Institute, links to Barron Weather. But I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Clark. Anytime I have an opportunity to opine, I'm up for it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Beyond Rockets. Don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and on YouTube at Beyond Rockets. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Beyond Rockets to stay up to date with new episodes as they are released. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.